What do you know? It's another Tuesday night, and what's that mean? It's a Tuesday night with the Hawk. So I'm super excited for tonight. So I've known Brian for some time. I'm excited. We were just chatting a little bit before we went live, and I told him I think I might be as excited to do this and learn more and hear more and the story. And I'll say this, and also a real story, authentic. It's not a made up marketing story or anything along those lines. And he's going to bring kind of a different perspective on this whole entire thing from the standpoint of, you know, he's done exactly what it is I'm doing, a lot of the other whiskey tubers, things along those lines. Um, so that alone, and we'll kind of dive into some other things with them as well, and kind of take this thing back and where it all started and how and all of that. Because I think this is going to be kind of a full circle kind of thing for really all of us, me, and kind of hearing the story and where it all started, now kind of where we're at this point. So it'll be an awful lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I told him I've held off trying this until now. I wanted to kind of give him my first impressions of this live with him. I have allowed it to be open for probably a good, I'm gonna say 20 minutes or so. Let this thing breathe a little bit and kind of do its thing, and hopefully it'll open up a little bit. I've not tried it. I did have a couple snifferoos or two of it, but I couldn't help myself. But we'll dive into everything tonight. Looking forward to this. As you guys will see, so if you're inclined and you want to purchase a bottle, I did link the Seelbach link directly in the chat. I also have it in the description of the live as well, or the video. So if anyone is inclined and they want to pick it up and help support not only Brian and Seelbach and all that, then feel free to do so. All that stuff is right there for you. So let me go back and say hi to a few people that were in here, and then we will get this thing going. So Top Dog, good to see you, Johnny. Appreciate it. Marty Party, good to see you, bud. Who else we got? Mr. Roy R. Walks. Good to see you, Roy. C. Lamb. All right, so tonight is your night. So if you were looking at this bottle and staring at it, you're going to get a good idea of what this bottle brings. So thanks for jumping in tonight. Appreciate it. What's up, Ethan? Good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping in. Joe, the sample guy. Good to see you. TK must maybe not in the field today. Maybe some rain or something. Good to see you, Trevor. There's Eric, Connoisseur Cigar. Good to see you, buddy. The man, the myth, the legend right there himself. So Mr. Mike Fratney, good to see you, Mike. JG, the ball buster. Mr. Ed Williams. I know Ed's probably sitting out back having a good cigar, hopefully a good whiskey. So good to see you. There's Bigfoot himself, Mr. Girth Brooks. Good to see you, buddy. Timmy Cornet. Good to see you, Tim. Says, hey, Scott, looks like you enjoyed the trip to Michigan. Yep, it was a great time to New Holland and Traverse City. We had a great time there. So that was a really fun pick. So we'll dive into things here tonight and kind of just give you a good rundown on what you can kind of expect from this. It's going to be something I'll say a little bit different, and again, you're going to get an authentic story that kind of supports everything. So rather than waste any more time, let's bring the man of the hour on, Mr. Brian Beyke. So Brian, what's up, brother?
Look, you're giving yourself the punishment here because, I appreciate you waiting for your first tries for this, but now you're going to have to give me and the people your real opinion, because I don't need smoke blown. I want to know how people are actually interacting with this pour. So thanks for having me on, man. It's, it's fun to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for jumping. I know we were on for a second. We were off. We were on. So we're on. So here we are. It all worked out pretty good. Came together today, and here we are. We're ready to kind of get after it. So Let's do this. Let's we know kind of where we're at right now, but let's kind of take this thing back to give everybody a little perspective and background. For you. When was that moment you kind of felt like you got into bourbon and you felt, man, this is something I think I can really get behind, and why?
It's a really interesting question because, I was born and raised in Louisville, but bourbon was not a part of that story. I wasn't even really a huge drinker. I spent a majority of my life in Louisville and then moved around a lot. I went to school in Cincinnati. I kind of did coffee stuff. People who know me know that I've been into coffee for over a decade. And we did some moving around different places in Ohio, down to Dallas for a bit, and then came back to Louisville and working at the coffee company that I was with at the time, Quill's Coffee. In trying to, I did that kind of marketing communications with them too, and kind of wanted to look at how to reach coffee drinkers the same way that whiskey drinkers came for the Bourbon Trail. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I probably should be into whiskey, but I have what my wife likes to call an addictive personality. So like, I try and be really mindful about adding, new hobbies to the equation. But, yeah, I pretty quick, I mean, that's probably, I don't know what, 7 years ago or something like that, just kind of started getting into the whiskey journey. And honestly, that was before, really even knowing about my dad's side of the family. And I mean, we'll get there, but I know that I come from a line of farmers, but I don't do that. I don't live where that side of the family lives. And so, there is a lot in between kind of my start with bourbon, that history there, and then kind of bringing all that together.
Do you recall kind of like that moment, or generally speaking, that kind of time when you first started with it? I know everyone's probably, dove into the cocktails and probably introduced that way a little bit. But do you remember kind of like what it was that made you start to think, man, I think maybe I could really kind of get behind. I know, you come from a coffee background, and there's a lot of that sensory part of that, of course. And then the transition to whiskey, I guess, naturally being kind of in Louisville, it probably all kind of came together, and you had a bourbon that kind of got you thinking, man, this is maybe something I could really get behind.
Woodford Double Oaked.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, might be different for some folks, but Woodford Double Oaked, it was a different flavor profile. And you're not wrong. I mean, before that, I was really into cocktails, and the downside about being into cocktails and making cocktails is once you run out of a specific ingredient, you're kind of done with a whole sector of cocktails unless you rebuy into that. And there was a point in time where I just said, you know what, I'm going to take a break from buying cocktail ingredients and maybe just start buying single bottles of bourbon. And so it was Blade and Bow, it was Woodford Double Oaked, and then I forget, it was something else. And then that was it. And then, kind of at that point, then it's looping in to be like, oh, we have lotteries in town. We have raffles in town. And then it's easy, for the most part, getting into whiskey when you live in Kentucky.
Yeah. I'm sure, for you, the rabbit hole is probably even easier. You're there, you're exposed, like you said, you can go down the road. There's lotteries, there's, every store doing a release, and now you got to go and get it. And yeah, for me, that was a lot of that. I didn't have as much access probably to that as you did, but I also have a little bit of that kind of addictive personality where once you kind of get into something, you kind of get into, that locked in kind of mode. And you just want it all. And for me, it was interesting because it wasn't Woodford Double Oak for me. It was just a bottle of Woodford. And I was with my dad one evening at a bar, and I was kind of just wondering, I'm like, hey, what are you drinking? And I'm like, why are you just drinking like what appears to just be like whiskey, not knowing a lot about it. And this is, I don't know, this might be 10 years ago now. And I tried it. And at first I was kind of like not either wanting or expecting to like it. And I think I like really appreciated it much quicker than I thought. And it was kind of from that moment on of just trying a couple of other little things. And then, it was down the rabbit hole. Then it wasn't long after being on the Bourbon Trail. And, you couldn't buy enough things, right? There wasn't enough, bourbon to buy. And, so that was interesting. But I think the perspective that everybody kind of has or kind of comes from to establish what it is that gets them kind of interested in all those kind of profiles and tasting things is always interesting to me, kind of how that all started. So let's kind of like, I guess, go forward a little bit. So once you've kind of established, now, you kind of like it, you've kind of gotten into it maybe for a couple of years, you want to now try to do some reviews. And I'll say this, if you guys haven't seen, Brian stuff, Abandoned Bourbon on YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff, he's got a great nose and palate. So I mean, he's been on a barrel pick with us and all of that. But aside from that, you can tell the passion comes out and I'm gonna say I think for like Four Roses, to me that's always been my thing that I've noticed you have really kind of
Oh yeah.
gravitated at least earlier on. That Four Roses kind of caught you, and it was the bug that kind of bit from that, so to speak. But you know, once you kind of got into that comfort zone of all of that, you know, what was that like for you, making you think, you know, hey, I think I can do this. Like I feel like I've got something that I can share with others and maybe start a YouTube. So what was YouTube channel? So what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, I'm going to back up just 1 second because I don't want to leave
Mhm.
this note out. You know, I'm sure that you've run into folks like this, and there's a lot of people who support your channel and watch your stream too. I do remember though, when I was first coming into bourbon, thinking "Eh, there are so many releases, there's so many products. This is an industry I could never learn about. Like it, it seems like a mountain you could never climb. Because
Yeah.
and even now, you know, there's continuously more things come out. And I'm sure maybe a lot of industries feel like that. But I only want to say that because I've been there and I know that there's other folks that are there. And sometimes it's easy to miss that, like, you know, when people can feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much to
Yeah.
gain. But yeah, I mean, Scott, you and I go back far enough that um you remember Drew, you know,
Oh yeah.
Drew P.
Yeah.
Whiskey
Yep.
was a colleague of mine in coffee before he was a colleague in the whiskey industry. And
Yeah.
so he and I go way back too. You know, I had purchased coffees from Stone Creek. Stone Creek had sent me some stuff before, and it was Drew who actually, you know, he had established himself a YouTube channel. And,
Yep.
and in a way, in the way that he talks about stuff, just kind of, you know, no frills, just kind of drop the pretense. You know, I still don't feel like there are very many channels that existed the way that Drew existed when it talked about whiskey.
Yeah.
And he had reached out to me saying, I want to start a podcast. And I have a history of doing podcasts. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been doing podcasts for a decade, you know, 7 or 8 different podcasts. My dad always said I had a face for radio. So, you know, I try and stick to that. But we started that, and when we did it, I didn't want it to always be Drew P. Whiskey plus the guy that's on the podcast with Drew P. Whiskey.
Right. Right.
So I knew I had to start doing something. Whether, you know, I didn't necessarily want it to be reviews, but I didn't know
Mhm.
what to do. I didn't know what to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have my history of tasting and judging coffee for work, and then also for competitions, chocolate um for competition as well. And
Mhm.
so uh, one of the things that I've done some videos early on, this does get to your question. I'm not beating around the bush anymore.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, one of the things that I kind of always harp on is people learning kind of their tasting language
Mhm.
is what I like to say, which is, you know, there's not a wrong or a right way to drink something or to say what you taste.
Yep.
And all our job is as a consumer, that's not like a you versus a me versus a Jason or anything like that.
Right.
Anyone's job is just to talk in their tasting language,
Yep.
and then somebody else talks in their tasting language, and we try and learn how we decipher each other's languages for mutual connection, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense,
Yep.
and how you exchange those languages. So if you're tasting something that's kiwi, whatever, and I
Yep.
taste something that's I don't know, I say it's a red fruit, it doesn't have it's not a right or wrong. I mean, that's those things
Right.
don't actually exist there. We're just
Yep.
trying to figure out how to translate to understand one another. And the only reason we try and do that is because we want to help each other figure out what we like or how to
Right.
describe what we like, right? And so
Yep.
I've always kind of been about that type of language with coffee, because there are so many people who will come to the table and they're like, I don't know how to describe what I like and don't like. I'm like, it's okay. Right now, you just tell me what you think about this versus that. It's my job to try and translate what you're saying, right?
Correct. Yep.
So I think over time, especially, yeah, roses is funny. I did kind of anchor in on that brand specifically, which I will say is a bit funny because overall, I wouldn't say I gravitate towards pours that have a lot of spice in them.
Yeah.
And Four Roses, we're pulling from a distillery with 2 high rye mash bills, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I just kind of keep hitting the nail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and try and
I
just
mean,
do things the way that I do it, because I want other people to do it the same way. Because when you're
yeah,
trying to build people, when you're trying to let people build rapport with you, they just need to know that you're consistent.
correct.
That's all that it is. Whether you're right
Yeah.
or wrong isn't actually the thing. People want to know if they align with what you're saying. That's
Yeah.
primarily it.
Yeah. And I think that's a very, I think fair statement is that like we're just kind of guides, like our interpretation of what it is we're tasting, whether it's similar or the same or completely different than what other people say. I think what you can kind of do is just learn from a lot of it, like what you say, I say, Jason, Matt Porter, the Bourbon Junkies, whatever, whoever it may be. Um, you know, I would say everyone's right. Everyone is describing whether it's right or wrong, it's your interpretation of what that, I'll say whiskey. I mean, it could be any spirit, but yeah, we're just a guide. And I think, as people begin to develop their palate, I think they will kind of start to fall in line with identifiers. Like you said, the language that each person speaks is, again, their interpretation. Doesn't mean the other person is wrong or anything along those lines. It just what it is you may gravitate towards. And I've always felt like your perspective was very similar, or your identifiers were very kind of in line with what I was, kind of picking up on things. So I always appreciated, watching, your videos, because, they were authentic. There's, nothing phony about it or anything. It was just, a guy telling everybody what he felt about the whiskey. And that's kind of a refreshing thing for the most part. But yeah, I was, you know, going back to like, man, when did you start that thing? I mean, I was that 5 years ago at this point, maybe even longer. I don't even know what it is, but it sure feels like
Yeah,
it was.
I was trying to go back to look at, because I popped up to the site for the podcast yesterday, and I was trying to see when like some of our last episodes were on. But I mean, gosh, it was a
Yeah.
while back. It was a while back.
Well, I mean, whatever it is, I mean, for you guys to even go back and watch other videos for other spirits, I think, in whether it's a new whiskey now or whatever, that part is kind of irrelevant. You can still pick up on a lot of those same tasting notes, and I think, again, if you just fall in line with a few people that you kind of appreciate their palates, it is what it is. That's this is not competition between any of us, or whatever that may be. This is just a bunch of guys like us that are just having fun and staring at a camera, talking to ourselves or into a mic, whatever it may be. But anyway, all right, let's do this. Let's kind of fast forward this thing a little bit. Let's kind of dive into the story part of it. I think the blue corn, the tie that you have with your family to this, and we'll kind of dive into the bourbon and kind of get after this thing a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this product is it's several things happening at the same time. So, what you're saying at the very beginning of the show is still accurate about, oh, there's some authenticity here. It's not necessarily marketing, but there's marketing here too. So the let me take a little drink real quick, and then we're gonna get into this. That was not whiskey, by the way. Back. I don't know where my water is, so I'm throwing back Dr. Pepper.
I've always felt it was very easy when people like are tasting whiskey and they'll have like soda before. I've always wondered like how that like relates. Marty in here, he'll have like a big old fat chew in, like how,
Yeah.
like, but anyway.
Well, to be fair, what I told you before the show too, we just got done with KBF, and then immediately coming home, I've been sick for the last couple of days, so I still haven't really been able to dial in on my take. I've been doing better today, but haven't super dialed in. So I'll be tasting with you, but whiskey has not been my main thing I've been drinking. It's been Emergency and Liquid IV. But this release, so it's a culmination of a lot of things happening. A couple of years back, my dad had showed me a photo of Beyke Farms, a truck of Beyke Farms delivering corn to this distillery. And I knew that we produced corn. I knew that the family did corn, tobacco, and other things, because I remember growing up and going to my grandpa's farm, and not some of the other farms. So like I think that his brothers and family is who had done primarily a lot of the corn farming. But I remember spending time on the farm growing up. That I lost my grandparents when I was relatively young. So it's been quite some time since kind of going out that way. But when my dad had shown me that photo, I was into whiskey at that time. And I thought to myself, I didn't even put two to two together that would even be a possibility. Right. And so it had me start to wonder, well, what does that look like? As I was getting into bourbon. So the part of me was like, how much corn do we make? Like, can I take a truck can I go to Starlight and just say, hey, make me a barrel? Like, I want a barrel of my corn's whiskey someday or something like that. And, nothing took place, but it was always kind of a concept in the back of my head. Like, could there be something to this? Simultaneously, my family does, they produce yellow dent corn. They don't produce blue corn. So, this product is not a Beyke's family blue corn product, but this is blue corn from the same distillery that my family sells to. And so at the time when this was being distilled, from my math, it's taken me a little bit to kind of run some numbers back. But when this product was distilled, I believe we are supplying probably 10% of the corn to this distillery. Wow. 14 to 16 truckloads of corn a week is what I was told. And given their production numbers at the time, the yield and what that does in a barrel was putting it at about 10%. There might have been a gap in time where they didn't sell to the distillery, but they should be back to selling again. And the platform of working at Seelbach, being a bourbon enthusiast, having the ability to work on creating products, whether it's this or something else, brings the fortune of being able to tell the story of the family, right? To pay some homage to that, because let's face it, if you're not the Petersons, right, no one's talking about you, or unless you're Jay Henry, unless you're Frey Ranch, unless you're farm to bottle, right? You don't really hear about who's producing the grains. You hear maybe some stories from within the building and forward, but you don't necessarily get to pay homage to farmers. My initial concept to this was like, can I do an ode just to farmers, and like shout out all different types of Kentucky farmers? Been, kind of a large undertaking doing something like that. But, again, multiple stories in one. My dad and I didn't see eye to eye in a whole lot of things. Whiskey was one in the later years of his life that we did kind of connect on. And so, it's a little bit of an homage to him. As something that I think he probably wouldn't appreciate it. He mainly just drank Old Scout mixed with 7-Up, but he would have had it on his bar, right? So, something he would have thought was really cool, that he would have shown his old Air Force buddies, that they would have thought was cool. Yeah. It's a way to give some reflection back to the family, and for being able to play a role in the whiskey industry that we love so much. At the same time, it's 70% blue corn, and tasting as much whiskey as I get to taste in a year, I don't take it for granted, but I love blue corn, and expresses itself differently in different ways, in the different products you get to try. So when I got a chance to try this, it was immediately a guess how much, when does it come out? When do we start working on this? And we hit the ground running, right away. So
I guess, before we kind of dive into it, I guess what was that? So once you kind of established all of that, now you're to the point where you have the distillate, you have kind of what it is you're going to work with. Now I can even back up a little bit, because for me, blue corn is something that's a little bit of a it's different. It's a little bit of a novel. I shouldn't say novelty. It's just something different.
You could say that though, because I think a lot of people think it is.
Yeah, it's different. Like to me, and I guess I don't know. I don't know.
That's just a tortilla chip, right? That's not actually something you make whiskey out of.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I think a lot of us just aren't overly familiar with a lot of these different varietal grains. Blue corn is one of them that doesn't feel very common. So when you see things like this, it's interesting. And that's one of the things that's always been intriguing to me, beginning of those things that just made me want to try, want me to be able to try something like this. So I was excited to get my hands on this and really kind of give it a try. So I'm interested in, but yeah, if rather than me ramble, what was, once you kind of had this spirit in front of you and you knew kind of what you had to work with, what was that process kind of like for you in putting this all together?
Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, what I was excited about were two things. One, there's not many Kentucky blue corns out there.
Yeah.
A lot of the blue corns I've tried are from outside of the state, whether
Yeah.
it's Texas, Indiana/Colorado, wherever.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily from Kentucky, even though there are some in Kentucky. And then to have the flavor, I won't get too spoilery, but to have
Yeah.
the flavor, I thought there was a lot of promise there. Now, tasting through all these barrels, I mean, they have a lot of flavor. And so
Mm.
one thing that I really appreciate about blue corn is viscosity, mouthfeel, body. That wins a lot
Mhm.
for me. So you asked a really good question, but when these barrels come in, it was part of the question about whether we would just immediately just put it out at cast strength. But I didn't want to do that, because one of the things that I felt, and so far from the feedback I've gotten, I feel like people have said the same thing. My fear sometimes with putting out a whiskey that has a slightly younger age statement. I think some people are fine with 6 years. I think some people, still see that on the too young of side.
Mhm.
The thing that I hate the most is when people would taste it and they're like, "Oh, I can pinpoint the age. Tastes like a 5 or 6 year product."
Hmm.
And for all the positive characteristics that this whiskey has at cask strength, I personally felt like it could be massaged with
Hmm.
time and with slow proofing to maintain the richness that you want, the
Mhm.
flavors that you want, but it actually unlocks more positives and hides more of the negatives. And so
Interesting.
it was a multiple month process of working with this to get it to where I felt like the drinking experience met where I thought it had the most optimum positives and the minimum negatives, and
Mm.
it balanced really, really well. So
Interesting.
I think the feedback that people have been saying kind of matches with that it drinks well. I won't say much about it.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can
All right. Well,
taste it before we
yeah.
go
Well,
dive into it.
let's dive into this thing. I'm excited to try this and see exactly what this is. My only experience, and you mentioned it before, was kind of Texas stuff and still Austin. That's the only experience that I know of off the top of my head that they've used that blue corn. So that's the only real. And again, I think it's maybe a little bit different considering that it's coming from Texas, so it's got its own
Yeah.
profile. But that was
Well,
kind
and the
of
funny
interesting.
thing is too, I love comparing it to the other products because they're. I mean, I like blue corn. I got them all over here. So like, I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of the Still Austin blue corn.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of the Smoke Eye Hills too.
Hmm.
Um, but also, e- telling somebody that like you could only have 10 blue corn bourbons would be like telling people you could only have 10 yellow corn bourbons. Like they just wouldn't work. So like,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like right now we treat it as like, oh my gosh, like it's this insular thing, but
Yeah.
it's, I'm not, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more blue corns pop up in the next 3 years.
Well, that's interesting. And I think we're kind of getting to the point now where, I think a lot of us from a connoisseur standpoint, want those kind of different things. So, all right, let me get into this, man. Thanks again for joining. I'm honored
Hey, thanks for
to
having me.
taste this thing with you. So,
Absolutely.
oh boy, man, the nose like right away. So, I mean, I guess for me, like that very first one is this very interesting, like either like red, like caramel red or green apple, like sugar, cinnamon. Oh man. Very, yeah, for me, it's very like fruit forward, very much like green or red apple, but with really nice, like almost like a warm caramel. Like it almost feels a little fall-ish. Like there's a little bit of a fall feel to me on this. Maybe a little hint of, I do like there is a little bit of a, I said sugar before, so there is a little bit of a sweetness. Man, this is all right. This may sound a little bit, maybe this is just the oak or whatever, or maybe a combo of all of it. Boy, it's got that. I love that kind of like almost salted caramel apple feel that this thing has to it.
And I will say two things. For people who know that I'm into Four Roses, they'll probably also, if people watch my Four Roses content because they're into roses, I think they'd also be into this pour. There's a lot of things I like about this.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me of Four Roses as well, which is really, really interesting. But I will tell you one thing too, that you're mentioning about all the fruitiness. What I find fun about all the fruitiness is because when I did this blend too, where we put the barrels together, I went through all the barrels and I categorized them in terms of like low, medium, and high notes. And this was not a fruit dominant batch to me, but when putting it all for like the barrels that went into it, but when they're all together, there is a lot of fruitiness, which has me excited about continuing to work with the barrels to see, what they do.
Yeah, I think you also get like a little bit of like, there's some nice kind of like, to your point, that spice, and it feels very much of a baking spice, including a little bit of kind of black pepper. I think this is now starting to feel where early on it felt where you have a little bit of that sweetness up front. Now the balance and richness kind of start to feel like they come out, like it's settling into a slightly like darker profile. I think you get that initial punch or that wave of fruit, but now that kind of like richer, darker complexity starts to feel like it's coming through. So,
and honestly, now that you've opened it, I'll probably be texting you for the next 2 weeks about it, because when prepping this product, I have never had it taste the same exact way twice, which has been part of the frustrating.
I love that about a whiskey, though. That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yep. All right. Let me get into this thing. Let's try this thing right now. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, sir.
Generally, I don't like to like judge something right away, but I feel like with this one, my very first thought was almost this like blueberry note or something that was very I don't know, but like if I say like, I don't know, I'm always afraid to say like a goofy like thing because people are gonna be like, you're just making shit up. But like I've had not long ago some like goji berries. It was something that's a little tart but sweet and a little bit of a tang to it. But still,
like I said,
man, it's good.
It's weird, man. It does some interesting turns. So in the chat, Jay was saying, what's the age? This one's about 6.5. I think it was 6.6 really, for this batch. Depending on when I do batch 2, they might be 7 years by then. If I get it out before the end of the year, I think I might wait till January. I think in January is when they turn 7. So I might wait till then, but we'll see. And then Wayne had asked, which roses recipe am I talking about? I think this tastes like it's hard to say. It doesn't have the spice like a bee recipe, but it reminds me of a lot of bee recipes. Like this reminds me of like OBSO is what I think about when I drink this, or like OBSQ is what I think about when I drink this, but it's not as spicy as those.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you get with this, it's an interesting wave because up front, I feel like as you sip on it is a lot of the sweetness. Then it starts to settle into a little bit of that darker kind of profile, a little bit more spice. I'll say even on the finish, it starts to lean a little bit into that leathery tobacco, a little bit of maybe some black pepper, while still with that little bit of a lingering fruit that's there. So it's an interesting wave so far. I'm interested now to get down the road to see what this thing's going to do, like in another week, a month, even further down the road. That will be really interesting to see what this thing kind of does. So, oh man. I'm always like wanting to like find more. That's always my problem, is sitting down with stuff. Not very often do I find myself wanting to just drink a whiskey and not wanting to like evaluate the damn thing, which is kind of frustrating because a lot of times I know and I want to just drink it, but I find myself wanting to just dive into it a little bit more. So
yeah, it's our curse. That's the thing I've always hated about being into tasting things, is sometimes it's difficult to enjoy. I think that's why I like cocktails so much, because I don't analyze cocktails. I just throw them back.
Yeah, that's probably a very good point. Like I never really think about that from the standpoint of, like an old fashioned. You kind of just know what you've got. There's not really a lot of, difference necessarily. I guess it could be a little bit, but I don't know.
I will say too, this does make a great old fashioned. If you use Peychaud's bitters and like blue agave syrup, it's a great way to keep the core profile tasting like the core like the Peychaud's is a little bit more on the floral side, and then the agave is just a really nice, slightly like, I don't know, it's sweet, but I think they complement really well for one another and make a really enjoyable old fashioned.
Orange citrus, maybe a little kind of baker's chocolate kind of note comes out a little bit in this. So, yeah, I like that. I like that citrusy kind of, almost feels like a little bit of a burnt orange chocolate, baker's chocolate, something like that.
So I got to ask, so again, I took this, we got it to 112. Where I spent the most time was between 109 and 113. And I felt like right in this very seemingly small range, above and below that, I noticed, either a fall off, like it changed a lot in that particular range. So what I want to hear from you, like while you're tasting it though, again, knowing that this could be lower proof or higher proof, how are you experiencing just its drinkability and or mouthfeel?
Yeah. So for me, I think the nice part, one thing I really enjoy with a lot of whiskeys, is I'm probably more of an oak fan, I feel, than a lot of people. So I appreciate when you get those kind of heavier oak notes that come oftentimes with some like leathers and tobaccos that work really well with some kind of sweet and spice. Now, for me, the one thing that I've noticed as I've sipped this is the spice for me really kind of continues to linger, which lengthens that finish. So I like that an awful lot. So I think it transitioned for me a little bit up front with a little bit more of that apple, pear, kind of that kind of fruit, into what almost now feels like a little bit of a darker, like semi-fermented fruit a little bit, just a darker fruit in general, but mixed very, very well with that spice, nice oak. Like the oak is there. I feel like it's done really well from the standpoint of, you're not like overthinking this. Like I'm not focused on it's too oaky or there's not enough oak. I think it's done really well from that standpoint. But that leather tobacco, little bit late for me. I was picking up again some of that maybe orange, chocolate, but great spice, baking spices, little maybe hints of black pepper, some cloves, something like that. So that's an interesting thing when whiskeys kind of transition like this as you take your time with them. That to me is what makes a whiskey very, very, interesting. And I guess I'll say this because I think this is oftentimes where somebody would say, well, how would a whiskey like this compare to like a George T. Stagg, right? Like people will give you these crazy comparisons. And my answer would be it's not so far off from the different standpoint. There's just different sections of that whiskey that are what they are based on the amount of time that that whiskey was in a barrel and what it'll do. But a whiskey, just because it's 6.5 or 7 years old, does not mean it can't have the same richness and complexity that an older whiskey can. It just can be different. So,
Yep.
that's why I think, a lot of times when people say, it's kind of like a younger whiskey, I'm like, I don't know if I really agree with like when people like want to still now, like, I feel like we've become so spoiled that if it's not super old, the default is just it's a younger whiskey. And I think to this point, this is where a whiskey, even in that 6.5 or 7 year range, can offer that richness and complexity that is on par with what you will get from an older whiskey. Now it's a different kind, but the analogy is kind of the same if that makes any sense. So I think when you have a whiskey like this, you can really appreciate it for what it is. I mean, I love when whiskeys just transition into different things. It's not just, kind of flatline and you're searching and nothing ever happens. It has a great mouthfeel. I think there's a nice velvety texture that it has to it. So that is something I think is a key component in whiskey that at oftentimes, myself included, um, either forget to mention because you're caught up in just trying to give people tasting notes and things like that. But I think with this, it does have that rich, velvety, spicy texture that I really enjoy with a whiskey. So
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes, especially as I sit with it, even though it does have some spice that will hit and then kind of continues and like elongates the finish, I
mhm.
think sometimes I forget that it's a 21% bourbon. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it
yeah.
should drink with a little bite to it. And yeah, I think what I'm just happy with about it is to have a product that drinks the way that I like bourbon to drink, something that does make me think, has a lot of flavors to unpack, and has a really good mouthfeel that I'm not
Mhm.
afraid to go to. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed this. I mean, now you kind of have, a bar to work off of, So I mean, you're going off of what you're trying to put together at the time. I'm assuming. I think you ended up with a really great bourbon, something that's different, a little more unique, with the blue corn. But to me, this is where it gets interesting for a lot of people is that, when you have a chance to try something like this that's different, I don't know. I think it just exposes people to, you know, getting outside of that profile that we're just so locked into and trays and just all the big guys, right? Like you can get that stuff anywhere. This is kind of is a really interesting kind of profile. So I'm digging it so far. I'll tell you that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, at the end of the day too, like, if we pull all these things back, you know, like, I love being able to jump on the show, kinda, like, talk about it, tease it apart and whatever, but at the end
Mhm.
of the day too, it also I also was lucky that we were able to put out a product that didn't exist in the market.
Right.
When it comes to Still Austin, it's bottled and bond, it's 100 proof. When you
Yep.
talk about Smoke Eye, they have cast strength, they have 93, both good expressions.
Mhm.
Um, you look at Bluegrass Distillers, they do they do one that is um, a bottled and bond product as well. So I wanted to have something that had a mid-proof point that was less like, it gave the rich drinking, the people who want like a cast strength bourbon,
Yeah.
a, a cast strength kind of experience, but it wasn't 130 proof for somebody who doesn't want hazmat pure alcohol blast.
Yeah.
Plus, mathematically, if you have an ounce of this and you put a teaspoon of water in it, it should take it down to like 96 proof. So it's a pretty
Yeah.
quick math for somebody at home to just like use a teaspoon thing in an ounce, pour and
Mhm.
bring that proof down for a little bit easier of a drink too.
So I guess for everyone from a perspective standpoint, I guess, why don't you kind of share, I guess, your experiences, I guess, with your whiskey and kind of what this kind of represents, I guess, for you.
Yeah, it's been really cool because there have been a lot of family members who have reached out with a lot of excitement about it. And I
Mhm.
think kind of that same thing that I led on with the story early on. There are so many people who just go day in and day out. They just do their job, right? And nobody recognizes them. Nobody
Mhm.
necessarily has to recognize them. They just go on without recognizing. I mean, I am really fortunate, when doing stuff for Seelbach. I get to do, I do tasting notes on stuff all the time. I do photos and stuff all the time, but I don't have hype behind my channel or my social presence or whatever. And I don't ask for it, but I put out stuff because I want people to be able to see if they resonate with that information.
Yep.
But like that, with the family stuff, it's a proud moment. I think everyone in the family was proud to see our name on something like this and have people getting attention.
Mhm.
And I think that if dad was alive to see that, he would have been like, it would have been a really proud moment for him too.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something that's really interesting to that like you can't really put a value on.
Yeah.
Um, but also again, to put out a product that doesn't exist, it's something that because of where I'm at, the landscape and being able to see things, you're able to.
Yeah.
And what's hard though, because I've had some people reach out too, and they're like, "Well, you need to do a review of this." I'm like, "I don't really want to." They're like, "Well, it's your
Yeah.
product. You have it. You can compare it to stuff." I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, I know I can, but I kind of just want other people to do it." I
Yeah.
I I
Yeah.
I think that's part of my problem though too. And that's the same thing with the channel. I
Yep.
don't. I always think that if you're doing a good job of what you're doing, other
Mhm.
people will generate that
Yeah.
attention back for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's how I know that I'm not a good reviewer, because my channel doesn't grow. So no, but I'm hoping to change that with the bourbon and that people
Good.
like the bourbon. I mean, so far I feel like there's been a lot of good response to it, and
Yeah.
I'm thankful. I was glad to put out a product that didn't have to be a 10-year hazmat limited release.
Right.
Like so many products are coming out
Yeah.
these last couple of months have been. And I'm glad to put out a semi-reasonable product that doesn't have to be celebrity backed for the same kind of stats and twice the price, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like I just wanted to put out a bourbon that people would enjoy drinking and had the type of complexity and flavor that I look for in a bourbon. And I
Well, and
think that
that
we were able
it's
to accomplish that.
yeah, and that's the simplicity of it, right? To all of that, what you just said, you did ultimately what you wanted to do that would represent you, your family, the way you wanted it to be done, still have a really nice bourbon to be in the market against something that's a little bit different, unique, all of that. I mean, we've all gotten so used to that chase of all of these things, right? Like it just gets to be exhausting where it's just one more thing, one more thing. And here you have an opportunity to get again, it's one more thing, but it's something different, So I think for a lot of you guys who either have it or will buy it, I think you're gonna find that it's a really interesting, well done bourbon. And again, to how I like evaluate things is I love when you get a whiskey that changes throughout while you're drinking. And and I'll say this about a lot of them. There are a lot that just are kind of what they are. They don't really change. They just kind of stay where they are. They're in their own lane, so to speak. Um, and those have their place, right? Like we all enjoy a lot of those, I would say daily. I know people always like, oh, drink daily, but it's just one of those things where this is going to give you something different. And I think that becomes enjoyable in today's day and age is finding something that's different, kind of I don't want to say push the envelope, but again, something that's going to offer you a little bit of a different, whiskey experience. So I'll say kudos to you. I think you did a really, really spot on job with this as your first bourbon. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't what I thought. I mean, I've got so many projects that have been spun up in the head. This was not something I thought would be like the first thing to kind of put out. I mean, aside from picks or other like blend things that I've done, but like the first like go out there. But I'm happy that it is, and hopefully, I'd be curious to hear your thought on this too. But just tasting the product while you didn't taste it at cast strength. I mean, the thing that got me excited was being able to hang on to some of these until they get to be like 10 years old. I mean, this bourbon's going to be like a dynamite,
yeah,
So that's what I'm looking forward to. Like putting this out now is great, and then as we start putting out 7-year products, with what we're doing with it starting next year would be great too. But getting to continue to see this age, I'm really looking forward to it, because to me, it doesn't have the flavor profile of like, I think somebody might hear this and be like, I can't wait to taste that craft blue corn. What's it going to taste like? It's going to taste all wacky. Because I don't think it tastes wacky. I think if you were to put this in a blind for somebody, I think it's going to be sneaky. I don't think you're going to taste that it has a different tell type of profile to it,
Yeah. It is. I mean, it is more, I would say as much as like we're like talking about, the blue corn, this and that. I don't know if that would really be an identifier right away. Like I wouldn't necessarily drink this and just think that like right away. I don't know if I have enough experience to taste that blind to think, oh yeah, blue corn, like that's the profile. I mean, that's not what I'm thinking. I just know what it is that I smell, what I taste, whether I enjoy it or I don't. And I think what this has, the one thing that I always kind of fall back on is, the richness, the complexity, and the finish. Does it have like those kind of three components? And if it does, and there's a little bit of a transition through, like I think that's a good whiskey for whatever it may be. And again, that could be all the way from a whiskey that's whatever, 2 years up to 20 years. They all have these different components of how you evaluate something, but there's things that everybody looks for in a whiskey. And I think this has a lot of what at least I look for in a whiskey that makes it enjoyable for me. So to that point, that's where I think you've done a really, really nice job with kind of crafting, this blue corn bourbon. So
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing more people's thoughts on it. I think in my tastings with folks too, I think that it does surprisingly well. I think, if you go back through like the competition cycle, you constantly find MGP products coming back and doing really well. There's just something about, I don't want to say the acidity, but there's something about it that on a very sweet corn dominated palate just kind of like goes, something different.
Yeah.
And I think this does. I think if this like is in a blind with stuff, I'm not saying it's going to win. I'm not saying it's going to win or be in the top of all those. I don't know. Maybe it will. That'd be cool. But it does. If you go to a pour that you're like, this is definitely better. If you go back to it afterwards, you're like, it's kind of like we said with the George C. Stagg thing. You're like, I don't know. I mean, this hangs really well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting part is I think, doing these, again, like we're talking about this bourbon, like, in a singular, aspect, but this next to some other things that are within that kind of proof range, I think that would be very interesting to see how much different or how much this stands out amongst the others from that kind of different standpoint. Like, how does this relate to, again, something else that's in that 115, ish, proof point, whether it's cast strength or single, whatever it may be. I think that's always the interesting test, is that when you start to work these things into other, other whiskeys, blinds, whatever it may be, it may make this thing even taste different, tasting it amongst those others. So I'll have to throw this in some blind within that proof point. I think you could probably get within, 5 proof points one way or the other, and that be a fair, assessment in terms of proof from that standpoint. But man, I think overall,
I was circling around 109 proof for a while, but the Pursuit guys yelled at me that I was trying to one up them on their 108 proof. So I had to just knock that one out. They're like, oh, one more than 108, really? So I had to
Let me let
scrap
me
the whole
let me let
project.
me ask you this. So with it settling in at 112, where were you kind of in the proof range of bringing it down to 112? What kind of range did you have to work with a little bit there?
I mean, the barrels ranged from like high 120s to mid 130s.
Oh,
Um,
geez. Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to work with, and that's what.
Wow.
So again, and that's why I throw back to you. Knowing that now,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that you're missing out on viscosity, bringing it down to
No.
112 with that
No.
mouthfeel, and that's
Yeah.
why that's what I like so much is because I think that there was a lot there to give, and some of it was masked a little bit. It was a little tight, and I think that finding that right place. So, um, yeah, there was. I will say my wider extremities were probably close to like 107 to 117
Yeah.
is where I found like my first kind of getting close sweet spot. But the 107s and the 109s were they started to let in a bit more of the sour tannins than I wanted. Like I
Okay.
wanted some of the oak and stuff to exist, but it gave now I do think this drink's well lighter. Like I have considered whether I do a bottled and bond or something lower proof. So we'll see
Yeah.
what happens with that or what kind of mix of
Yeah.
barrels does something like that. But when I got above 113, man, it had another punch of it's like this roller coaster. And every hill's got something unique, but it's like,
Right.
there's just decisions that you have to make. And so I thought 113 had a little bit more sharpness, but it came with a bit more fruit. And
Okay.
117 I thought had like a really great delivery of richness, but did come with a lot more noticeable spice. And the way that I describe spice a lot of times, again, I'm really susceptible to spice. That's just my own kind of thing. Like I don't necessarily lean towards spicy pours that often because a lot of times I associate drier spices with more youthful characteristics.
Okay.
And when you're working with something that's 6.5 years old, I didn't want somebody to taste something that we kept purposefully hot and spicy
Hmm.
because we decided to, and for
Yeah.
somebody to just be like, "Oh, that's a nice 6-year-old bourbon." I wanted
Yeah.
somebody that if they didn't know what you knew, if someone poured them that it might have been harder for them to say what the age was or what the proof was or
Yeah.
even what the product was. That
Mhm.
was my goal.
And that's a very good point because to that point, when you get in those high range 120s, 130s, something along those lines, and they are a little bit on the, I'll say, younger-ish side, right? Like I hate to say that because it feels like you're kind of like, you know, trying to tell somebody you're like it's craft whiskey.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
not my, but I to what you said before, I think when you're in this range of that 6.5, 7 years, maybe even 5.5, when it gets those high proofs that oftentimes comes with big spice, like it can be very off-putting for people. Like it comes across as very heavy ethanol. Like it's just like kind of a hot, like almost a hot mess, right? I mean, we've all
Yeah.
had those. And when you get that, like as much as people think, I think they want, you know, big high proofs all the time, if you'd really try some of them, like there are some that are just not very good at those high proof points, but you add a little bit of water and it just settles things down so much more nicely. And
I will say though, there was one shorter barrel in the lot that when we got to tasting it, it's probably I don't remember. I want to say it's maybe like a 137 proof. And that sucker was so creamy and rich and fruity. Um, it's really good. I'm really excited to keep seeing what kind of things, you know,
now let me all
come
right,
out of
so
this.
let me ask you from that standpoint. So is that
Mhm.
something that you'll, now that you've done this, is that a bourbon or a particular barrel that you would be more interested in sharing just that profile, or do you think that would do better blending that in with, some other barrels? Like how do you now kind of juggle that? How do you interpret that a little bit?
Well, again, something that we talked about. I don't remember how much you and I talked about it so far in the stream, but we talked about it a little bit before the show about, I am in a unique position, which is like, you know, I'm still learning. I have a brand now to represent, so this is probably a really terrible thing to say,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I'm a pioneer for other whiskeys too. Like I still every day am tasting all of this stuff because that's my job too, right? It's not
Yeah.
like a one or the other sort of thing. And I mean that because this this brand isn't the end all be all, right? And so
Hmm.
with that, I think comes time to be able to make decisions as they need to be made. And I think that if it goes into a blend, it goes into a blend. I think that, um, and like I mentioned too, with the first batch, a third of the barrels in this batch, I would consider fruity barrels, but it was pretty
Hmm.
fruit forward. And so I'm curious how other blends will continue to articulate as well, whether that
Yeah.
would be an ingredient needed. But single barrel, cast strength, none of this stuff's out of the realm of possibility of releasing too. I will also give you this
Yeah.
little nugget too. I mean,
Yeah.
on Seelbach's website, you know, this blue corn is probably not the most direct family tie-in I would say that we have. I would say that the Seelbach's weeded
Mm.
is a closer tie-in because I believe that probably does actually have um Beyke corn in it. So like,
Mm.
even picking barrels and again, there's a lot of there's a lot of freedom in what we're able to do too. So I've thought about doing like I don't know, just doing more things that aren't exclusively blue corn,
Yeah.
but utilizing blue corn.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, rather than just kind of lock in and, kind of I guess let the whiskey kind of dictate where it goes and what it is you do with things, rather than, kind of force it and you end up with something you're really not, overly happy with or whatever. I think the whiskey will kind of dictate, what you do with that. So,
Absolutely.
man, well, I'll tell you this, like, I think you've done an absolutely fantastic job. I mean, I think now the anticipation for what it is you do next, I think that will be a kind of a cool thing, coming off of this. But I mean, rather than even going, jumping way ahead, I think now going forward and hearing just people's perspective on what this is as a whole, and their interpretation, how it kind of, lands for them. That's always been an interesting thing for me, is to hear what it is, people enjoy and what they don't. I know you probably hear, and a lot of other people have heard it, that that some whiskey, any particular whiskey, is, oh, it's trash, it's all these other things. Well, that's just an interpretation. Like, I think for whatever somebody dislikes, there's the equal to that being a whiskey that somebody really enjoys. And that's always an interesting thing for me, is what it is that people do appreciate, and why. And you don't have to like everything. No one expects anybody to like everything. But there is something out there for everyone. And I think, like, from what we've been talking about tonight, this will offer up something that is different. There really isn't this that's out there. I think you
Yep.
kind of have hit
Yep.
the nail on the head with this, that this is a little bit more of a singular kind of product, and one that a lot of people, I think, will really enjoy as they get into it. So,
And so the challenge that comes from that is like the thing that's always in my head then is like, okay, if this is what you can come out with first, are there more things that you can find that are less known about that you can highlight? Like
yeah.
that's where I go to, in my mind. I don't want to say first, but like early in the things that I go to, because it's like, y- yeah, you know as well as anyone that when there are continual releases, and I've learned from what I've been able to do at Sealbox too. I understand these days how hard it is to be a consumer because I taste through so many products and know that there are ones that I put in this hand and there are
Mhm.
ones that I put in this hand. But a consumer doesn't get to taste all the products I do to figure out which hand they're going to put them in. So
Yeah.
they've got to be able to find a friend who's got a pour, try it, find review. Like it's hard.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
hard to
Yep.
figure that out. And so, I think if anything, and if people resonate with this, my hope is that people would kind of see another angle of what I look for in a whiskey. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, this would be a fun I think this would be a fun one for a lot of people to pick up, try, share this thing because there's gonna be a lot of people who have not really had a chance to try something like this. And the people can kind of tell a little bit of the story of what this is. And, maybe that will resonate with somebody else and take them down, a different rabbit hole of things or whatever. You just never know what that particular whiskey is going to do to somebody else that will really kind of draw them in or, you know, try something that they've never had before that really just resonates with them. So some slightly different, profiles. And I've always enjoyed dissecting that slightly different kind of profile. So, but
Have you tried do you say you've tried the Still Austin, right?
I have, yeah. Yep.
Have you tried the Smoke Eyes?
I've not tried the smoke eyes. No, the only ones I've had are unless that's their regular bourbons. I don't know if that's what that is. I have some smoke.
Yeah, so the regular Smoke Eye is blue corn. So Girth
Okay.
had asked this question. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. So Girth had asked kind of earlier in the chat, Brian, I know the proof is different, but how does this compare to Smoke Eye Hill? I normally don't like heirloom corn, but I love Smoke Eye Hill. Now, I will put on a salesy hat for just one quick second. The Still Austin and the Smoke Eye are not exclusively blue corn products. They are, I believe, either blue and white corn or blue and yellow corn. So a percentage of it is blue corn and percentage of it is not. That said, I still really like them. I feel like people have had mixed reactions to the Smoke Eye barrel proof. So I don't know that I can fully say, what your experience with the cask strength would be, but the 93 proofer is this is one of my go-tos. This is one of my, I recommend to a lot of people to go to because it's a really good full drinking whiskey. And one thing that's interesting about Smoke Eye, so Smoke Eye is from Colorado, but I believe it's distilled in Lawrenceburg. I want to say this is all contract distilled stuff though. So not necessary, but, and they've got them in, I believe, different char levels, maybe different barrel sizes too. I think that's accurate. And I will say what I appreciate in blue corns in general, I do feel like there's a different, darker berry note in most of them, like what you notice in the Beykes. I think you notice that in Smoke Eye. In the Still Austin, I think it comes off a little sweeter. It's a little bit more like blueberry cream kind of pie. Like it's a little lighter, little sweeter flavor. But when I compare the Beykes to the Smoke Eye, I feel like I can tell that it has the barrel influence that it does, the same way that I can tell that 13th Colony has barrel influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that the Beykes Blue tastes a bit more like, I don't want to say it tastes heritage because it doesn't, it's hard to describe, but it has more heritage similarity flavor profiles than the Smoke Eye, which has more like you could, it's hard to say. It's hard to describe. I could tell there's more barrel stuff that's going on in both the Smoke Eye products, even though, again, I really like them.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, again, it's, to that point, again, there is where the difference comes in. Like as much as this stuff is the same, it's different. You can kind of give or whatever the spin may be for every single whiskey, bourbon, rye, doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, it's simple. Enjoy whatever it is you like, and don't let other people necessarily influence you from a good bad standpoint. I think if people tell you what's good and what's bad, I always kind of take that with a grain of salt. I'd rather just try it on my own. What's good and bad to somebody, man, I've had some other things that to me have been really good that other people haven't, and vice versa. So, try some different things. And I think this will be one of those bourbons that kind of fall within that category of, something that's out of the norm, something that we're not all quite used to tasting. And I think that's a really fun thing in today's day and age with all of the chasing of different brands that we do, now you've got something sitting in front of you that will give you a little bit of a different perspective on a bourbon and actually be different, so give that thing a try. It's linked in here and linked in the description and of the show notes, all that good stuff. So all right, let's ask you this before we kind of wrap things up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of what else what do things look like for you kind of going forward? I know you're doing stuff with Seelbach, so what's everything kind of look like for you on a daily basis at this point?
Man, if you could see my camera is, I moved my camera back here from where it normally is, so you can't actually see what's on the table. But I mean, on my table, I've got new Nash Tuckies that come out soon. We've got the new Wolves releases. I got Dancing Goat. I got some rare character over here. I've got some other batches of some other cash. I got cash strength Beykes over here. We've got I got the new Bourbon Deluxe rum finished over here. Okay. I've got, I mean, again, I don't ever get to really talk about it to people. I mean, because I don't ever want it to come off sounding like braggy. It's never meant to, but I know people take it however they want to. But like my day to day is sitting down, doing photos, videos, and tasting notes on whiskey. It's every single day. And so, I'm in a room full of whiskey that I taste all the time. And then what I try and do with that is say, how do I categorize it? How can I try and tell somebody else whether they're going to like it or not? So, with what is, we're getting ready to go into OND. So it's going to ramp up, except for January felt a little slow, and then it's been like, and so it is still on that, but just knowing I'm also having to go into OND. So we're going to continue to be working on the various Beykes products that we've got in the works. Like that's definitely going to be happening. We've got there's several projects out there aside from kind of doing the day to day. And then too, for folks who, some people know, some people don't know, I do the podcast with the Pursuit Spirits guys on their Pursuit Spirit side. So not the Bourbon Pursuit. Apparently I don't wear an ascot. I'm not allowed on the main show. They only keep me on the behind the Pursuit show. So I do that. And then I run their social medias and stuff like that too. So, I'm regularly working with those guys. I'm regularly trying those products and trying to throw in advice, and then trying stuff with Seelbach. And, that's my office is actually in the Pursuit HQ upstairs, right across the hall from where they were podcasting when they got out of Kenny's basement before they now moved downtown. So, I'm waking up and doing this and tasting through the stuff and trying to just provide whatever I can for folks. So I keep doing that. So people, it's hard because when I have gaps in time and talking to people, like, what's going on? I'm like, what's new? I'm like, everything and nothing at the same time.
Where do I start with that? Right.
Always new products, but never something different. Like I'm always moving, which is great. And I think it's, what's hard for me to be able to provide to somebody else, I've had people, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I've had folks before kind of ask me, why don't you have a Patreon? Why don't you have a way to support? Be like, I don't need to. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do this stuff. Yeah. And I hope that it's a value to anybody who takes it, because I don't have to give them a wall in order to, there's no knocking anyone who does in the clubs or whatever, but like I am fortunate to pick a lot of barrels every year that I make available to folks. And so, I've got 8 rare characters I'm waiting to release. Between the last 2 years, I've probably picked 40 Nashville Barrel Company barrels. Like anyone who wants to reach out to me on Instagram, shout out the YouTube channel. Cause people will see in the stories and stuff, they'll see like little glimpses of the things that I'm doing. Cause I'm constantly doing stuff. If I'm not working on Beykes or something that you actually see, there's always something happening.
Yeah. I was going to say, so basically, I mean, we'll kind of wrap this thing up in a nutshell. So basically, other than that, not much else really going on with you then, it sounds like.
No, I mean, lots of family stuff. We don't need to get into that, but there is always a lot happening, but I'm thankful I'm thankful to be here, and I'm thankful to
Yeah.
be able to do what I do.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job, and I know oftentimes, people don't see or get a chance to recognize the people kind of behind the scenes, and I know exactly what you mean because, when you tell somebody, you kind of taste whiskey and do all these things as kind of like a job, it does kind of come across as feeling a little braggy, and that's never the way, I think anybody really means for it to be. But at the same time, I say that it can still be an awful lot of work, right? There's still a lot of things that are done. We're not just necessarily sitting around just by ourselves in a dark room just pounding whiskey all day long. That's not really, what it is. So I do kind of understand a little bit of what you're saying. But I'll say this. I think you've done, for this being your first bourbon, um, I think you've done a really, really fantastic job with this. And I think now the anticipation for just looking forward to, what you're going to do, going forward, with the brand, I think will be an interesting thing to watch. But rather than, going even that far forward, I'll say for everybody watching now or the replay, do yourself a favor. I think getting a bourbon like this will really offer you and your friends, your family, an interesting perspective on a whiskey. Take this, blind it with some other things. I think you'll really see the uniqueness of this. So that's my pitch from a standpoint of a whiskey enthusiast. I'll say, like, I think you've done a really, really fantastic job with this. So
I really do. I truly appreciate it. I think what I've been thankful for from some of the early folks who were able to try it was that my goal was not to overpromise on the product. And what I've heard from other people is that that it delivers more than what you
yeah,
promised for it. And so I think that's the sign of a good product, right? You don't want to, because then you don't want people upset to buy it. And again, it's hard to buy a bottle of whiskey these days. It's expensive. So, you don't want to leave people disappointed. But I appreciate everyone who's been able to try it. And I appreciate you for waiting to try it with me and bringing me on the show to talk about it.
that was maybe the hardest part of not wanting to. So I had opened this because
I'm
I
really
want what I
surprised
want.
you didn't lie to me and actually do it.
Oh, no, no, no. I knew eventually we'd come on and do this. And I really wanted to just hold off because it's a fun thing to do, like to try this and give you kind of a, your first impression and all of that. Now, admittedly, that can go both ways, right? Like you could taste it and you're like, it's just not doing it for me, whatever it may be. But to that point, now I get a chance to see what this is right now. And then maybe in a week or a month or whatever it may be, how much more this thing's going to change, what else it'll
Yep,
do. Does it get more fruity? What does this thing kind of have in store? So that'll be interesting to see exactly what this thing does. So
absolutely.
all right, let's do this. So we're gonna wrap it up. I know I got to do the randomizer here. I'll get the names and stuff here in 1 second. Um, all right, all right. So, all right. So with that being said, I guess where people can find you, I know you've got the Instagram, the YouTube, all the email, all of that. Do you mind sharing that stuff with everybody so they can kind of find you on those platforms?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Abandon Bourbon. So it's not ED, it's just Abandon Bourbon. You can find me on almost all socials for that. I'm at YouTube the same way. So youtube.com, Abandon Bourbon. You can find the product, bikesblue.com. You can find it on Seelbach. Or again, if you just want to browse, picks, very rarely are they labeled that they're mine, but ask me and I'll tell you. I mean, again, if you ended up liking this, or if you tried other things, or if you like what I've done on the channel and you wanted to be like, hey, I want to buy some of the things this guy picks, you're going to see him on sealbox.com.
And that's where they can find pretty much everything, right? Sealbox.com.
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay.
right.
And I've got it linked in the top here. I've got it pinned. So if you guys want to give it a shot, you can do that. And I also have it in the show notes as well. So I've got one question. So my wife was
Mm-hmm.
was nice enough to take all the names and stuff. She was asking somebody in the chat, I think, is Douglas Chrysop also taste and sensibility? if you can just give me a thumbs up or whatever that may be, it'll change things in terms of how we put the names in the randomizer, whether it's the same or different. So I'll give you a couple seconds, and if not, we're just going to go with either one or both of those names. Hopefully it'll be somebody a little bit different, but we'll find out. Oh, Doug is. Okay. So if Julie, if you're watching this, just it's the same. So yes, all right, cool. All right. So we're good. We're good with that. So she's going to give me the names. We'll throw everything in a randomizer. And I'll say this, the Emily over at Seelbach, who's amazing. She and I were emailing this morning about some things, and I let her know, and well, she had reached out before, but I let her know that Brian was coming on tonight. And so they were really nice enough to be able to provide something for tonight. So I'm excited to be able to do it. And it's always a fun little thing for at least you guys. Now somebody gets an opportunity to get their name thrown in the wheel of death, and we'll spin away and see exactly what that is. So let me see if the names are there. We'll throw this stuff in the chat and see who the or in the randomizer. We'll see exactly who the lucky winner for tonight is. So okay, let me throw the names in. She's even got nicknames and stuff in here now. Whiskey Nose is no longer Whiskey Nose. Now he's Marty Party. So a lot of good things in there. So all right, we've got. I'm gonna copy this, throw it in the randomizer. Let me throw this in there. We'll see who the lucky winner is tonight. So let me go back to this. I'll share my screen. Where's that? There it is. Share screen. Okay, so you guys can see that. So let me I'm gonna shuffle the thing up. I'll shuffle it 3 times. I got everybody. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. So good luck to one lucky winner tonight for one of the Beykes blue corns. So you guys are gonna really dig this thing. So here we go. Here is the for tonight's winner is Mr. Roman Carter. All right, congrats, buddy. Congrats on that. Let me get rid of the shared part there. Whoops, not it. That's not it either. What did I do? Good old tech. Why is that not? Jeez, now it won't leave. Jeez. All right, there we go. Okay. Good. All right. Finally, good old snafus, technical difficulties. Always my fault, that's for sure. Whenever there's technical difficulty, it's on my end. But hey, thanks again for joining tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for putting something that's different, unique for everybody. I hope to God you guys give this thing a try. I think you'll really enjoy it. So with that being said, thanks, guys. We will see you next Tuesday. And as I say, it's about the journey and not the destination. This whiskey is proof of that. So it's always going to continue. And we'll see you when we see you. Brian, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Scott, thanks for having me. Absolutely. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.